My mother always said, family comes first, but I guess that didn't apply to me. For as long as I could remember, she looked through me like I was air. Amanda, my sister, got her love, her praise, her hugs. I got tolerated, corrected, forgotten. Then one night, I found a half-burned letter in the backyard fire pit. My name was on it, dated the week I was born. The words inside, they shattered me. She's yours now. I'll disappear, like you asked. It wasn't just a letter, it was a confession. And when I brought it to her, my mother didn't panic, didn't cry. She looked me in the eye and said, "You were never supposed to find that." Then she cut me off, threw me out like I was nothing. But she made one mistake. She tried to burn the truth. Instead, she lit mine. And now I'm going to tell everything. Subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to love you most. My name is Claire Holloway. At least, that's what I was told. I never questioned it. Never had a reason to. Sure, I felt different like a guest in my own family, but I chalked that up to being the difficult child, the one who just never seemed to get it right. But maybe I should have questioned it. Maybe I should have looked harder at the way my mother Margaret hugged Amanda like she was a miracle, and barely touched me at all. The way she used to comb Amanda's hair, whispering compliments, but barked at me to tie that mess back. The way her face lit up when Amanda walked into a room and dimmed the moment I stepped in. I spent years convincing myself I was imagining it. Until that Saturday. I was back at the house for the weekend, helping Mom clean out the garage. Amanda had bailed again, claiming she was too busy, but Mom didn't seem to mind. Amanda could do no wrong. I could never do anything right. We barely spoke. She handed me boxes like I was a mover, not her daughter. Her voice clipped. Her eyes never met mine for more than a second. By the afternoon, I was sweaty, tired, and emotionally numb, the usual effect of being around her for too long. I went to take out a bag of trash, cutting through the backyard. That's when I saw it. Smoke. The fire pit in the yard was burning, not unusual. Mom had always been old school about destroying documents, but something about the way she was standing over it, arms folded, her whole body stiff like a statue, made me pause. She looked nervous. I slowed down, tried to act casual, tossed the trash bag toward the bin, then walked past the fire pit like I wasn't paying attention. But then I saw it, a piece of paper, caught in the grass just a few feet away. Its edges were burned, curling inward like fingers trying to hide something. Most people wouldn't have looked twice, but something told me to pick it up. The moment I touched it, I felt it like a cold jolt down my spine. It was old, yellowed. The ink had smudged from heat, but the handwriting was still legible. At the top, Margaret Holloway, my mother. The date March 17th, 1989, my birthday. I scanned the lines, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm sorry, Margaret. I never wanted it to happen this way, but she's yours now. I can't be involved. She's yours now. What the hell did that mean? My hands began to tremble. I read further. You said you'd raise her like your own. I'll disappear, like you asked. No one can ever know. My eyes shot up. My mother was still by the fire pit, but now she was staring directly at me. She knew. She saw the paper in my hand and froze, like a wolf who'd just been caught mid-hunt. I walked toward her slowly, the letter clenched in my fist. What is this? I asked. She didn't try to grab it, didn't try to lie. Her eyes just darkened cold, vacant. You weren't supposed to see that, she said. Flat, icy, like she'd rehearsed it. What do you mean, raise me like your own? Who wrote this? Is this about me? Silence. Answer me. I didn't mean to yell, but it came out sharp, cracking through the air between us. Still, she didn't flinch. She turned away, like I didn't exist, like she'd already decided I was done. "I think it's time you left," she said. I stood there frozen, disbelief crashing over me like a wave. I waited for her to take it back, to explain, to soften. She didn't. She turned back around, her face blank. "You're not part of this family anymore. You never really were." The words didn't hit me all at once. They seeped in like poison, slow and paralyzing. I remembered something a time I was 8 and broke a vase in the living room. Amanda had laughed, said it was her fault, but Mom still dragged me by the arm, yelled at me for being careless. She told Amanda she was too kind, and told me I was lucky to be here at all. I didn't understand it then, but now it all made sense. The way she once said, "Be grateful I kept you," I thought it was just another cruel comment in a long line of punishments. But she meant it, literally. I wasn't just unloved, I wasn't unwanted, I wasn't hers. And that half-burned letter? That was just the beginning. I left my mother's house without saying another word. No yelling, no tears, just the hollow sound of my footsteps on the porch and the weight of the letter burning in my jacket pocket. I didn't even feel the cold. My body felt too rigid, too numb, like I had just been ripped out of the only reality I had ever known. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every childhood memory through a different lens. Every cold glance, every backhanded comment, every moment I told myself I was just being sensitive. None of it had been in my head. My mother had never loved me because I wasn't hers to love. At some point before dawn, I sat up and turned on the kitchen light. I pulled out the half-burned letter, laid it flat on the table, and studied every inch of it. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, like whoever wrote it didn't have time to be neat. There was no name signed at the bottom, just a single initial D. Who was D? And why did he write like I was some kind of secret? I ran to the bedroom and dug under my bed, pulling out the old metal filing box I hadn't opened in years. My birth certificate was inside, crumpled, slightly water damaged. It listed my mother's name, Margaret Holloway, but under father. It was blank. I never questioned that before. My mother always told me he died in a car accident before I was born. She never showed me photos, never talked about him. No grave, no stories, just silence. But now I knew that silence wasn't grief. It was shame. I sat there gripping the paper, and a memory rose from the back of my mind, something I hadn't thought about in nearly 20 years. I was 13. Amanda and I had been eavesdropping on one of Mom's phone calls. She was yelling at someone. At the time, we thought it was a bill collector, but I remembered her voice shaking with fury as she said, "Don't ever call here again. David, she's mine now." David? The initial, the letter, the year. I didn't know a David, not in our family, not among her friends, but something told me he was the one. The man who had written the letter, the man who had walked away. I went online and searched Margaret Holloway plus David. Nothing. I tried Claire Holloway birth, 1989. Still nothing. Then I tried combining his name with our hometown in the year 1989. Only one thing came up. It was an old scan of a local newspaper article. The headline was vague. "Teacher accused of inappropriate relationship resigns from Lincoln High." The article barely said anything. No charges, no details. Just a single name, David Klein, a substitute English teacher, quietly stepped down after an incident with a student. The article was dated spring 1989. The school, Lincoln High, my mother's school. The year, my birth year. My stomach turned. Was it him? Was that what happened? I searched his name again, filtering for marriage licenses, obituaries, anything that might give me a lead. But it was like he had vanished off the face of the earth. No social media, no public records, no trace. Then something strange happened. The next morning, I got a message request on Facebook from an account I didn't recognize. No profile photo, no mutual friends, no posts, just one sentence. You were never meant to find that letter. Don't dig into the past. I froze. No one knew I had found it. I hadn't told Amanda. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't posted about it. I hadn't even said it out loud. I clicked on the profile. The name was D.H. The account had been created that same day. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I just stared at the message like it might reveal more if I looked long enough, but it didn't. It only confirmed what I already suspected: someone out there was watching me. And they didn't want me to know the truth. Later that night, I stared at myself in the mirror. I saw the same eyes that never quite looked like my mother's. The nose that didn't match Amanda's. The face that had always felt borrowed. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. I had a name but no history. A childhood but no roots. A mother but no love. And somewhere out there, maybe still alive, was the man who gave me half my DNA. The man who wrote a letter and walked away. The man who might have loved me once, in secret, from a distance. Or maybe, the man who abandoned me before I could even speak. I didn't know which one he was, but I had to find out. Because until I knew the truth, I couldn't trust anything that came before. Not even my own name. The message haunted me. I didn't respond. I didn't block the account either. I just kept reading it over and over again, like maybe it would change if I stared long enough, but it didn't. It stayed the same. Cold, ominous. A warning. You were never meant to find that letter. Don't dig into the past. Someone knew I was looking, and they wanted me to stop. But it only made me dig deeper. I realized the internet wouldn't be enough. If I wanted the truth, I needed someone who remembered 1989 better than Google did. There was only one person who came to mind: Mrs. Lorraine Whitmore, my mother's former neighbor. She had lived across the street from our old house since before I was born. Now in her 70s, she had known my mother as a teenager, and if anyone still carried whispers of the past, it was her. I drove to the retirement home that afternoon. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel the entire way. When I knocked on her door, she opened it slowly and stared at me for a long moment. Then she said something that made my skin prickle. "Well, if it isn't Margaret's ghost." I didn't know what she meant then, but I would. We sat in her tiny floral living room, sunlight cutting through lace curtains, the air smelling faintly of old lavender and dust. I didn't waste time. I pulled out the letter, unfolded it carefully, and slid it across her table. "Do you remember anyone named David Klein?" I asked. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. Her eyes scanned the paper. When she looked up again, there was something in her expression I hadn't seen in a long time: fear. She didn't ask questions. She didn't ask why I had the letter. She just said, "Your mother swore she burned every trace." My breath caught in my throat. "So it's true," I whispered. "There was a David Klein." She nodded. "Yes. He wasn't from around here. Came in mid-year to teach English at the high school. Quiet man? Kind? A little too curious for his own good. Your mother was 17, pretty, sharp-tongued, already bored with small-town boys. She liked attention. And he gave it to her." I asked, "What happened to him?" She sighed and looked down at her tea. "He disappeared. Just gone. Some said he ran off after the rumors started. Others believed your grandfather made him leave, but I was there. Claire, I saw things. Her voice lowered. One night I heard shouting from the house. Margaret was on the phone, pacing up and down the porch. I couldn't hear much, but one sentence stuck with me. She said, "You promised no one would know. You signed it away." She looked up at me. "I think he came back. Tried to see you. Tried to be part of your life." And she stopped him. I felt something inside me tighten. Why? Why would she do that? She hesitated, then leaned in. Because she was pregnant. Everyone knew it, but no one knew who the father was. Not officially. And then one day, poof, he was gone. And Margaret was raising a baby alone. Said the father was dead. Car accident. Tragedy. But no funeral. No obituary. No photos. Just silence. I stared down at the letter in my lap. So she lied about everything. She cut him out and never looked back. She didn't just cut him out. Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice now bitter. She buried him in silence. She made sure no one asked questions. And when people did, well, Margaret had a way of making you feel like you were the problem. I sat back, overwhelmed. All those years growing up in that house, feeling like a shadow. And now the truth was clawing its way up from the ground. She told everyone it was a one-night stand, Mrs. Whitmore added, that he left. And she made the brave choice to raise the baby alone. People applauded her for it. But I knew better. I knew there was more. I looked up. More. She nodded. That year, 1989, Margaret left town for a few months. Said she needed space. Said the pregnancy was complicated. But she wasn't alone. She stayed with a woman named Ellen King. They were close. Closer than friends. There were whispers. Of course. But no one dared ask. I frowned. Ellen King? Yes. I believe she knew everything. She was with Margaret during the worst of it. And when Margaret came back, she was different. Colder. More guarded. I think Ellen helped her hide something, maybe even hide you. My pulse raced. Do you know where I can find her? She still lives in Willow Glen, small town an hour east. Last I heard, she never left. Doesn't talk much about the past. I stood up, heart pounding. I need to find her. I need to know what really happened. Mrs. Whitmore reached out and gently grabbed my wrist. Claire, she said softly, be careful. Secrets like this, they don't stay buried quietly, and people who bury them, they'll do anything to make sure they stay down. Her hand trembled as she let me go. I thanked her and stepped into the hallway, the weight of her warning still echoing in my ears. I had come looking for a name. I got so much more. Now I had a lead. Now I had a woman who might know the truth. And I was ready to find her, even if it meant digging up things no one wanted found. I found Ellen King's address through a property record search. She still lived in Willow Glen, the quiet little town where my mother had supposedly hidden out during her pregnancy. It was strange to think of my mother in a place like that, so small, so peaceful, when everything about her now screamed cold and distant. But back then, maybe she'd been different. Or maybe she had just started learning how to hide who she really was. I didn't call ahead. I couldn't risk her hanging up or refusing to talk. I needed answers. Not later. Not eventually. Now. The drive took just over an hour, though it felt longer. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I wasn't sure what I was walking into. Another wall of silence. More lies, or something worse. Ellen's house sat at the end of a sleepy cul-de-sac. A neat white cottage with trimmed hedges and a bright red door. It didn't look like the kind of place that held secrets, but then again, neither had my childhood home. When she opened the door, she didn't say anything at first, just stared. Her eyes studied my face like she was trying to read an old memory. Then she whispered, "You look just like her." "Margaret?" I asked. She nodded slowly, then stepped aside. The inside of her house smelled like cinnamon and old paper. The walls were lined with bookshelves, photo frames, and the kind of dusty peace that comes from a lifetime of waiting for something or someone that never quite arrived. She led me into the kitchen and poured 2 cups of tea. No questions, no pleasantries. She didn't even ask why I was there. It was like she already knew. "I know why you're here," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "You found the letter, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just reached into my bag and slid it across the table. She didn't touch it, just looked at it like it might come alive and start screaming. Then she said something that turned my blood cold. "I wrote that letter." I froze. "You, what?" She nodded. "I wrote it. But they weren't my words. David dictated it. He didn't want his handwriting on anything. He was scared, terrified. Really. He thought if Margaret ever decided to come after him, even a single sentence in his handwriting could ruin him." My voice cracked. "So he was real." "He was very real," she said, "and he loved you." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of it all. "So you knew about me, about everything." "I did," she admitted, "from the very beginning." My throat tightened. "Why didn't you stop her?" Ellen looked away. "Because I couldn't. Margaret wasn't someone you crossed. She didn't scream or threaten. She calculated. She made you feel like if you didn't agree with her, she'd erase you. And back then, I was scared of being erased." I shook my head. "What did she do to him?" "She gave him a choice," Ellen said quietly. "Disappear or be destroyed." I leaned forward. "Destroyed how?" "She was 17. He was 32. If anyone found out what had happened between them, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be a crime. Statutory rape, career ending, life ruining. He would have gone to prison. She knew that, and she used it." "But she got pregnant," I said. "Yes. And at first, David tried to do the right thing. He offered to marry her, start over somewhere new. He even said he'd quit teaching. But Margaret didn't want a new life. She wanted control. She told him she'd raise you alone, but only if he agreed to vanish. No visits, no letters, no contact of any kind. And he agreed. He had no choice. Ellen said, he wasn't just afraid of prison, he was afraid of her. The way she looked at him when she talked about you, it wasn't maternal, it was possessive. She didn't want to be a mother. She wanted a prize, proof that she had power. I felt dizzy. I looked down at my cup, untouched. My fingers trembled. And me. Did he care about me? Ellen reached across the table and placed a hand on mine. "He adored you," she said. "After you were born. He tried to see you. Once. Just once. But Margaret found out. She told him if he ever showed his face again, she'd go public. She'd make sure no one ever hired him again. She even hinted at calling the police. After that, he gave up. For your sake." I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was ask, "Where is he now?" Ellen's expression shifted. Her eyes dimmed. "He passed away. 3 years ago. Cancer. He never married. Never had other children. But he never stopped talking about you." I stared at the wall behind her, the words settling over me like wet cement. "He used to write you letters," she continued. "Every birthday, every Christmas, he gave them to me, hoping that someday, when the time was right, I could give them to you." She stood, walked to a drawer, and returned with a small wooden box. She set it down in front of me and opened the lid. Inside were dozens of letters. all addressed to me, each one sealed in a different colored envelope, some decorated with little stars or scribbled hearts. They weren't just letters, they were time capsules, messages from a father I never got to meet, pages full of love I never got to feel. And at the very bottom of the box, beneath the envelopes, was a photo. It was old and grainy, slightly bent at the corners. A young man sat on a hospital bench, holding a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. Me! He looked tired, nervous, but also happy, not smiling for the camera, but smiling for the moment. I turned it over. On the back in faded ink was a single line. For the 5 minutes she was mine. That broke me. I clutched the photo like it could fill the hole in my chest. I didn't cry right away. I couldn't. I just sat there, numb, silent, frozen in a moment that had been stolen from both of us. Ellen whispered, "I'm sorry, Claire. You were wanted, just not by the person who raised you." And in that quiet little kitchen, surrounded by letters and memories, I realized something. My entire life had been built on someone else's control, someone else's fear, someone else's shame. But not anymore. Because now I had the truth. And I wasn't stopping here. The next morning, I drove back to my mother's house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't warn her. I just showed up, parked across the street, and stared at the front door for 10 full minutes before I had the courage to walk up and knock. She opened it like she had been expecting me. No surprise in her eyes. Just that same familiar blankness, the mask she wore for most of my life. Cold, distant, disconnected. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped past her and walked straight into the kitchen. The letter still in my coat pocket. The photograph of my father pressed flat inside a manila folder, along with photocopies of the DNA test and the witness affidavit from Ellen. She followed me slowly, arms folded. I stood in the middle of the room, taking it all in. The same tile floor where I had eaten my childhood dinners, spilled juice, cried over scraped knees. The place where Amanda had learned to bake cookies while I scrubbed pans. The place where I spent 20 years trying to earn love from a woman who never once looked at me like I belonged to her. I turned around and faced her. I spoke to Ellen. I said, voice level, "I know everything." She didn't react. She told me about David, about how you forced him out, burned his letters, lied to me my entire life. Still nothing. Then she walked to the table and sat down slowly, like we were about to discuss the weather. "What do you want me to say?" she asked, her voice flat. "I want you to say why." I said, "Why you hated me so much." She didn't look at me. Her hands stayed folded on the table. Her posture didn't change, but her jaw tightened ever so slightly. "I didn't hate you," she said. "I hated what you represented." I clenched my fist, which is what a mistake. She shook her head. "No, a weakness." Finally, she looked up. I was 17. He was 32. Everyone thought I seduced him, that I was just a fast girl chasing something older. But they didn't see the way he looked at me, the way he spoke to me. He made me feel powerful, like I was already a woman, not a child. Her voice dropped, bitter. But when I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. He begged me to stay quiet. He said it would ruin his life, his job, his future. So I gave him a choice, and he chose his freedom. I stared at her, my throat tightening. "You told him to leave." "I told him that if he didn't disappear, I'd ruin him. I'd call the school, the district, the media. I'd tell everyone what he did, and I would have. You threatened to destroy him, and then you punished me for existing." She didn't flinch, just said, "I kept you, didn't I?" Those words hit me like a slap. I kept you like I was a dog, a possession, a burden she begrudgingly carried. You kept me physically, I said through clenched teeth, but you never loved me. Not even for a second. You made sure I felt it every single day. She leaned back in her chair, exhaled through her nose. I gave you food, a roof, clothes. I sacrificed everything for you. No, I snapped. You sacrificed me. You buried the one man who wanted to love me, and you buried the truth right along with him. You didn't protect me. You protected your ego, your reputation. You raised me like I was an obligation, and you made sure I never forgot it. She finally raised her voice. Because it was easier to hate you than admit I was weak. The words echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. She stood, slowly, her face flushed with something that looked like shame but also fury. I didn't want to be a mother. Not to you, not to anyone. I wanted him. I wanted the power he made me feel. And when that was gone, when all that was left was a crying baby and the memory of a man who ran, I looked at you, and all I saw was everything I had lost. I stood there, shaking, not from fear, from clarity. You wanted him to suffer, so you kept me as punishment. I wanted him to remember. She said, I wanted him to know that no matter how far he ran, I had the one thing he could never take back. But I wasn't a thing, I said quietly. I was a child, a human being, and you made me hate myself for something I never asked to be. She turned her face away. You wanted the truth, she said, voice low. There it is. I didn't know how to be a mother to you. I didn't want to be. I nodded slowly, letting the words settle like ash. I figured, I said, I just wanted to hear you say it. Then I turned toward the door. She called after me. Where are you going? I looked back. To finally start my life without you. She didn't stop me. She didn't beg. She didn't follow. She just stood there, staring, as I walked out the door and closed it behind me for the last time. And I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Leaving that house didn't feel like running away. It felt like shedding a second skin I never asked to wear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't weighed down by needing her approval, her love, her presence. I was free to grieve, to rebuild, to finally exist as more than someone's mistake. I didn't know what came next, but I knew what I had walked away from, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, I buried myself in the letters David had written me. I read them all, one by one, in chronological order, as if I were catching up on the life we never shared. Some were short and hopeful little notes about how he imagined me, how he pictured what my laugh might sound like. Others were rawer, filled with guilt and longing. One line appeared again and again, scattered like a refrain. I hope you never have to hate me for staying away. But I did, for a long time. And yet, with every page, that hate unraveled. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been erased, and someone had to answer for that. One evening, while rereading a letter from my 3rd birthday, I noticed something strange. At the very bottom of the envelope, tucked beneath the fold like it had been shoved in at the last moment, was a smaller slip of paper. It was written in different ink, darker, and the handwriting was shakier, like it had been added on a whim, or maybe a moment of fear. It read, If you ever do find me, there's something you need to know. Ellen knows, but I didn't have the strength to tell you. I'm sorry. That was it? No details, no context? Just Ellen knows? My stomach twisted. I thought I had already uncovered the worst of it, that David was forced to leave, that Margaret raised me with resentment instead of love. But now I realized he had held something back. And Ellen hadn't told me everything. I didn't wait. The next morning, I drove straight to Willow Glen. No calls, no emails. I showed up on her porch like a storm she didn't see coming. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised, just sad. "You found it," she said quietly. "I did," I replied. "Now tell me what it means." She stepped aside and let me in. We sat in the kitchen again, but this time the air was heavier, as if the house itself knew there was something darker coming. "I didn't tell you because I didn't think you were ready," she said, "and maybe I was wrong. But now you deserve to know." She walked to the same drawer where she had once kept the letters and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was yellowed with time, the edges curled, the flap brittle. "It's not mine," she said. "It's from Margaret. She gave it to me after you were born. Told me to keep it sealed unless something ever happened to her. I never thought I'd be handing it to you like this." My fingers trembled as I took it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a DNA test, dated July 1989. 2 names listed. Margaret Holloway negative. David Klein positive. At first, I didn't understand. I blinked, stared at the page like it was written in another language. "What does this mean?" I asked. Ellen hesitated. Then she said the words that knocked the air out of my lungs. "Margaret was not your biological mother." I felt the room tilt. "What are you talking about? She was pregnant. Everyone saw it. She faked it," Ellen said, her voice almost apologetic. "She lost the baby 3 months in, but she never told David. She was terrified he'd leave her, that she'd lose him for good. So she stayed with me through the rest of the term. And when your real mother, a young girl, homeless, desperate, went into labor at the county hospital, Margaret convinced her to give up the baby. My heart was pounding. So she adopted me." "No," Ellen said. "Not legally. There was no paperwork, no agency. She manipulated the girl, promised her you'd be safe, loved, raised with everything she couldn't offer. But it wasn't an adoption. It was a cover-up. She stole me." Ellen nodded. "She took you straight from the hospital, told David you were hers, let him believe everything was fine. But that DNA test, she kept it hidden. I think part of her always knew the lie would catch up eventually." I stood up. I needed air, but the room felt like it was pressing in on me. "I need to find her," I said. "The real mother. Do you know her name?" Ellen looked down. She checked in under a fake name, Jane Hollow. We only knew she was 17, scared, and alone. Margaret used my name as a witness. The girl had no one, no ID, no next of kin. And when she left the hospital, she left without you." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. All this time, I thought the truth was that my mother hated me because of how I was conceived. But the truth was, I was never hers at all. And somehow that hurt more. "She made sure there was no trail," Ellen said. "No way for the girl to come back for you. She threatened her, told her if she ever showed up again, she'd make sure she lost you forever." I stared at the photo of David holding me as a newborn. Now that image meant something entirely different. He wasn't just holding his daughter. He was holding a child he didn't even know had been taken from another woman. "I want to find her," I said. "Whoever she is, wherever she is, I need to know where I come from." Ellen nodded. "Then you need to start at the hospital." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, clutching the DNA test in one hand and the photo in the other. I thought I had reached the end of the story. But I was wrong. Because now I knew the truth David had been too afraid to tell. And the secret Margaret never meant for anyone to uncover. The woman who raised me was a stranger. For days, I couldn't think straight. I walked around my apartment like a ghost, moving from room to room with the DNA test still clutched in my hand. I had uncovered so much too much, and yet it still felt incomplete. Like the final piece of the puzzle was out there, just beyond my reach. The woman who raised me had never given birth to me. She hadn't just lied about my father. She had lied about my existence. I went back to Ellen one last time, desperate. You said the birth mother was young. I told her. There has to be something, a hospital record, a name, a memory. Ellen nodded. Slowly, she gave birth at the county hospital, checked in under the name Jane Hollow, 17 years old, no ID, no next of kin. But I had a friend who worked as a nurse in the maternity ward back then. She told me the girl cried the entire time she was in labor, kept repeating one thing over and over. What did she say? Ellen swallowed. Please, just let her have a better life than mine. That was all I had to go on, a false name, a broken promise, and a single sentence whispered through sobs. I didn't care. I had to try. 3 days later, I drove to the old county hospital. It had since merged with another medical center, but the archives still existed decades of handwritten intake logs, medical notes, and admissions slips, most of them filed in dusty boxes and barely legible. I told them I was researching family medical history. It wasn't a lie. After 6 hours of combing through files from July 1989, my eyes aching and back sore, I found it. Female, 17 years old, no ID, admitted under the name Jane Hollow, vaginal delivery, baby girl, discharged without child, signed by Ellen King witness. In the margin, someone had scrawled a note mother declined to provide contact info, left before paperwork finalized. That was her. That was my beginning. But there was nothing else. No real name, no home address. She had vanished into the system before the ink was even dry. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. I requested copies of all ER admissions from the week before my birth, hoping anything might show a glimpse of who she really was. I flipped page after page until, on a form dated 3 days earlier, I saw something that made me freeze. A line had been crossed out in thick black ink, but the paper beneath it had bled through faintly. Just enough for me to read the first name. Christine. My breath caught. Christine Hollow. It couldn't be a coincidence. The last name Hollow was too close to Holloway. Had Margaret stolen it when forging my records? Had she met Christine earlier than we thought? I took the name to a private investigator the next morning, gave her every detail, every clue, every lie I had uncovered. She said it could take weeks. I told her I'd wait. 4 weeks later, she called. We found someone. She said, her name's Christine Holloway. She fits the profile. Former foster child. No parents on record. She vanished from the system at 17. Now works as a housekeeper at a motel in northern Ohio. My throat went dry. She's never had other children, never married, no criminal record, keeps to herself. I thanked her, hung up, and booked a hotel 2 towns over. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't even know what I wanted from her, but I knew I had to see her face. The motel was old and worn down, the kind of place people passed without ever really noticing. When I pulled into the parking lot, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the pavement. I waited by the laundry room, watching through the open doorway. And then I saw her. Late 40s, thin. Shoulders slumped forward like someone who had carried the same weight too long. Her hands were worn from years of labor, folding bed sheets with mechanical rhythm. She had a name tag clipped to her uniform, Christine. I stepped forward. She turned, startled, her eyes wide. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then I said the words I had rehearsed in my head 100 times, but still didn't believe were real. My name is Claire. I think you're my mother. Her knees buckled. She reached for the counter, one hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears instantly. Then she whispered, "Oh my God, you look just like him." "David?" I asked. She nodded. "I never wanted to give you up. I swear. I was scared. I had no one. Margaret said she could give you everything I couldn't. She said you'd be safe, loved, cared for. And then she took you." She sat down on a crate of linens, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. I sat beside her. "I didn't know she never told you," she said. "She threatened me, told me if I came back, she'd make sure no one believed me, that she had money, connections, that you'd grow up hating me if I ever tried to find you." She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue. A faded hospital bracelet, tiny, fragile, with one name written in shaky handwriting. "Claire." "She let me hold you for a few minutes," Christine whispered. "Just long enough to say goodbye. I kept this. Every year on your birthday, I held it and prayed you were okay." My throat closed. I don't know what to say. I managed. "You don't have to," she said. "You're here. That's enough." We sat like that for what felt like hours. Two strangers bound by blood and grief, and a past neither of us chose. She told me her story, how she met David briefly, how Margaret had watched them from a distance, how she learned about the pregnancy and stepped in, how she offered money, then threats, how she disappeared with me and never looked back. Christine never had another child, never built another life. She worked, she survived, and she kept that bracelet like a promise she could never fulfill. And now, 35 years later, I had come back. Not for answers, but for her. We sat there for hours, Christine and I, mother and daughter, two halves of a story neither of us had the strength to finish until now. She told Toy everything she remembered. The day she left the hospital, the way Margaret had waited outside with the car running, a forged form in her hand and a promise on her lips. "She'll be safe," she had said. "She'll be loved." Christine believed her. She wanted to. She was just a girl 17, scared, trying to make the least painful decision in a world that had never shown her kindness. She thought she was doing the right thing, until Margaret changed her number, disappeared, shut every door behind her. "She made me feel like I didn't matter," Christine said, and after a while, I started to believe it. She never had more children, never married, said she couldn't bring herself to start over, not after losing me. She worked whatever jobs she could find: laundry, motel cleaning, overnight shifts, trying to fill the years with something that felt like purpose. But nothing ever came close. She kept the hospital bracelet in a box for 30 years. Every time she considered looking for me, Margaret's voice came back. "If you show your face again, she'll hate you forever." Now she looked at me through tears and asked, "Do you?" I shook my head. "No, I hate that it took this long." That weekend, we didn't try to make up for lost time. There was no dramatic montage of catching up on birthdays or holidays or favorite colors. We cooked dinner together, laughed at how we both hated the taste of cilantro, sat in silence without needing to fill it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real. When I returned home, I laid everything out across my dining table: the letters from David, the DNA test, the photo of him holding me, the bracelet from Christine, the ashes of that half-burned letter that started it all. And I realized something. I wasn't just someone's secret. I wasn't someone's shame. I was the product of a love that never had a chance, of a truth that had been buried so deep no one ever thought it would claw its way back. But it did. Because I did, I considered going back to Margaret's house. I imagined showing her the test results, the photo, the truth she had spent her entire life trying to erase. I imagined shouting, demanding, asking her the question that still haunted me. Why? But then I realized I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not her apology, not her permission, not her version of the story. She didn't deserve to know the ending. So I wrote my own. I scanned the DNA test, photocopied every letter David had written, took a photo of the hospital bracelet, and I mailed them all to Amanda. No note. No explanation. Just the truth stripped bare. I didn't know what Amanda would do with it. Maybe she'd burn it. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd finally see Margaret for who she really was. Or maybe she'd keep believing the version of the woman who raised us, even if that version was built on lies. That wasn't my problem anymore. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment with more sunlight and less memory. I told Christine she could call any time, and she did, sometimes just to hear my voice, other times to share things like old photos, a soup recipe, a memory of my first cry. She didn't try to replace the time we lost. She just tried to be here now. And honestly, that was enough. I took a road trip one weekend and stopped at a small cemetery just outside Des Moines. David's grave was tucked beneath a dogwood tree, simple, quiet, like him. I sat beside it for over an hour. I told him everything, how I found the letter, how I met Ellen, how I found Christine. I told him I was angry, that I hated how he let fear win, but I also told him I forgave him because he never stopped loving me. And in the end, love matters more than presence. Before I left, I tucked one of his letters into the soil, the one where he wrote, "Maybe one day she'll come find me." She did. I walked away feeling lighter. For the first time, my story didn't feel like something that happened to me. It felt like something I had taken back. Sometimes, the family you're born into is not the one who defines you. It's the one you choose to love. And sometimes, healing doesn't come from revenge or confrontation. It comes from understanding where the pain began and deciding to stop it with you. So if you've ever uncovered a truth that changed everything, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, if someone ever made you believe that your existence was a burden, let me tell you something. You are not what they said you were. You are not where you came from. You are who you decide to become. And your story doesn't end where someone else tried to bury it. It begins where you choose to dig it up and write it anew.